Hello.
Hello,
One second, I'm just
Leonardo.
change.
Oh,
Oh wait, can't hear you. Sorry.
can you hear me now?
Yes, me. Hello.
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah, it was me. It was me. How are you?
Oh, okay, nice. Hi, I'm Miguel. I'm gonna be chairing your session today.
Fantastic. Hi,
So
Miguel.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Are you Spanish?
From Spain, but based in Brighton.
Based in Brighton. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm
How
half
about you?
Venezuelan. Half Venezuelan.
Half Venezuelan. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
And your half is German or something like that, I assume?
French. That's
French. Oh, okay.
some ancestors had German sounding name in my French ancestry.
Oh, okay, interesting. Interesting combination then. Nice.
Awesome. Nice to meet you, Miguel. Nice to see some people joining as well.
Yeah. Yeah, let's wait also for Carl to join. Yeah, can you share your screen just to check that everything is
Sure.
working fine? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna share it like
Okay.
this. And you see, oh, starting by the end.
The very end, yeah.
You can see this. Okay, cool.
Uh, yeah. Well, now it's
But yeah, well, if you
black
just
screen.
get to the
Okay,
end of
okay.
it, yeah,
Is that intended? Okay, cool. Yeah, we can
yeah,
see it. Nice.
awesome. Thank you very much.
Cool. So, are you based in? Was it Oxford or Cambridge? I can't remember now. Or
I'm so I'm doing a PhD at the Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research, part of Anglia Ruskin University. But I'm
that one?
living in
Yeah, yeah.
London.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm living in London. Living in London, yeah.
Oh, in London. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
nice. Cool.
Good.
Uh, okay. So. I guess we can start then. So today we have Leonardo Muller Rodriguez, and he's going to be talking about active inference and musical groove. So yeah, feel free to start whenever you want.
Thank you very much. Share my screen. Boom. Oh, so thank you, Miguel. Today I'll be presenting indeed about applying active inference to the musical groove. So I had the chance to present at the fourth Applied Active Inference Symposium in November about a narrative review on what is musical groove and how can be thought of as a social bonding musical mechanism. And so the focus today is really trying to model, based on this review, what I've found using active inference, mainly partial ups, so in a discrete space, which is POM-MDP. Who am I? So my name is Leonardo Muller Rodriguez. I'm a PhD student at the Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research. And my focus of the PhD is sleep music for dementia caregivers. And I'm right now in the recruitment stage. I just had my ethics approved. So I'm looking for dementia caregivers. So you might wonder how does musical groove and sleep music relate? It's both of them relate to musical entrainment, but sleep music is definitely not behavioral entrainment, more entraining to slow music. I'm also a composer, music producer, and musician. I have a BA in music production for media. And for context, I did a neuroscience MSc at King's College, London. So I won't be focusing much on groove, but I'm going to give you a bit of context of what is groove. It's the pleasurable sensation to move our body to the music. And it's characterized by moderate rhythmic complexity, which balances predictability and surprise. In musical terms, this is moderate syncopation. So, as mentioned, I did this review that I presented, and it's still not published. But if you want to know more about the Groove review, have a listen to the presentation. But one of the outcomes was a groove score, which I'm still developing the code for. This was the sort of equation, but I think I've changed it a bit. It wasn't, improved it a bit since. Because we're looking into active inference, I'll do a very brief introduction to active inference. So it's based on the assumption that humans' brain subjectivity and behaviors are unified by the fact that one individual takes actions and perceives them. And based on the autopoietic principle, this same biological individual is working in unity to preserve itself. Active inference also posits that the brain constantly generates predictions and updates them. And it's these predictions about sensory input, and it tries to minimize its uncertainty, its surprise, or its free energy. And by minimizing this, it allows, as a result, to act in the world. This framework has been applied to musical perception, as seen on the right. And very briefly, because I'm suggesting musical groove is a social bonding mechanism, when we're listening to a group of people are listening to a musical groove, it becomes a shared stimulus for the listeners, which allows for motor and emotional synchrony. And in active inference, this is termed generalized synchrony, which is having a shared world model between the listeners. Generalized synchrony requires flexibility of the world model, of the beliefs of the listeners, about the collective identity, about the behavior, collective behaviors. And so I'm suggesting to put musical groove on the spectrum of the rebus hypothesis, which is about free energy landscape flattening. So it's a bit of a context behind active inference. And now, following the recent publication by Peter Vad, I think that's how I pronounce it, which was about group level modeling using the partial observable Markov decision process. I took this model for the agents and added a two-layer conceptualization following Friston et al. 2017, where there's a slow layer for slow dynamics of the musical perception and faster layer. I'm giving you just a bit of context. We'll go into more detail later, but it's context for looking at the free energy equations, which will be referencing these matrices. So the observation model, the dynamics model, the preferences of the C and the E matrix. And then this represents one internal dancer. That's how we're calling it in this presentation. So the free energy equation, based on Da Costa et al. 2020, it's an equation that looks at interacting data distributions. And maybe it's not formal to say that free energy measures salience, but formally we can say it measures surprise. And what is it? It's complexity of the model of the agent minus accuracy of the model of the agent. How accurate is it? And what is the complexity? It's a KL divergence between the approximate posterior versus the prior. So what does it mean? It's comparing the updated beliefs given the new sensory data with the belief before the sensory data arrived, which could be thought as a hypothesis. So that's complexity, minus accuracy, which is the average log evidence or marginal likelihood. So it's how well, on average, do my beliefs explain the incoming data that I have observed. Formally, is the expected log likelihood. And so another important thing is the policy. So this is the policy is a sequences of actions that we plan, and there's several potential ways, different policies, and this is the distribution for which policies for the policies. And in essence, this expected free energy equation is risk minus ambiguity. And so it's the scale divergence between the approximate observation or outcome at t, at a certain point in the planned trajectory, given the policy, and the difference with the preferences of that agent. So that's the risk minus ambiguity, which looks at the expected log likelihood of those outcomes or those observations. So a high risk is bad because you're divergent from your preferences, and high ambiguity is bad because the sensory data you'll be receiving will be quite noisy given your model at the time and your set of actions then. And there's also a novelty term that we're not putting in here because the matrices in this modeling are fixed, so there's no learning. So policy selection. Just a quick note, why are we looking at the free energy equations? It's because it's one value that allows us to represent the complex model. So the policy selection requires policy preferences. So what are your habits? And it's also influenced by the confidence of those policies. So if you, this gamma variable shows you how flexible you are in your policy selection. And so this means that if you have, if you're more flexible, you're happier with greater free energy, whereas more confident means that you want the lowest free energy, expected free energy. A policy, again, is a sequence of actions, which we can term U, where each U is assigned to every time step up until L, which is the length of the policy. And here's just a restating of the expected free energy equation with the matrices, where we have the new state given our observation, the new observations, times our preferences and how we differ from our preferences. That's the risk. And then it's the new state given our action for that time step in the policy. And this is the state now times the action, times the entropy of the observation model. So this is a algorithmic sequencing of this expected free energy, where we look for every policy of a length L. We calculate the expected free energy, which goes through every time step in that policy, getting the action, computing the states, computing the observations given our model, and then you compute the ambiguity as given in our previous equation and the risk. And ChatGPT taught me that the risk can also be turned into an inner product, which is the inner product between the transpose of the observation matrix and the log difference between the observation and the preferences. Okay, so we're back here. This is the agent model of our dancers. There'll be a slow layer and a fast layer. Have initial states defined here with the D matrix. And then given the state that you're in, you have your observation model that gives you a certain observation, given the state of the sensory data. Then you act in some way from your B matrix, which is based on your policies. And these are influenced by your C and E preference matrices. This is observation matrix C and policy preferences. And so again, there's a slow layer and a fast layer for slow and fast dynamics. And that represents one internal agent, one dancer. These dancers are on a dance floor. And this is the environment. So the environment is composed of two things: a quantized or grid dance floor, where you have the different dancers, and an acoustic musical stream or signal. In addition, because we're putting it as a fast and slow layers, the differences here are the yellow is for the fast layer, where we have, for instance, beat level processing or measure level processing of the music. And the slower layers, we have musical phrases that are going. And so at the level of the dance floor, we can have smaller or larger chunking of the dance floor. Again, this is the representation of what would happen if there is a group level dynamic emerging between the dancers. So you have the environment that goes into a sensory agent. This is again based on this publication by Peter. And this filtering is sent to the internal dancers, which act in a certain way that can be grouped as a group level acting. Now, just to lay out this loop a bit more, another way to lay it out, we have the environment, which is the music and the dance floor, which is processed by the sensory agent here. I'm considering it as a cultural level sensory agent, which processes it. And this is then sent to the internal dancers, which then act in a way that can influence the group level dancing formations. Let's say partnering, for instance, there's a partner dance routine. And then this happens on the back to the environment. And an interesting way of thinking about the S agent is sort of collective consciousness, acting as a cultural filter. So that was a loop. And now let's populate these elements of the model. So we'll start with the environment, which would have two aspects, the dance floor and the acoustic signal. It could be just simply amplitude of the acoustic signal giving a sample rate. There's just an example that to illustrate. And hey, here's the same. We have a 2x2 grid for the dance floor to give out positioning. And this can be presented like this as a computational variable. And I'm not sure if this is important, but this tensor space, I think this is called. And so it will be that space. This environment is then sent out, is processed by the sensory agent, the A matrix, which we can think as the collective consciousness. Forgot to mention, but in my PhD, I'm using this brain-based music analyzer called the X system, which allows to extract musical features following this diagram. And I'm using it for this example here, where the environment, specifically the music, will be processed by the S agent. And then we'll have two layers. We have the fast layer with, for instance, these features, which the arousal, for instance, the valence, the binary beat, the volume dynamics, which feeds into the slow layer, where we can compute musical phrase tension and resolution trajectory, musical melodies, and the groove score that I mentioned that I'm working on, and the genre culture-specific customs. So for instance, what I mean by that is that if you go to a tango setting, then it will most likely be a partnering style dancing. But maybe if you listen to tango music in another setting, the customs, you might not need to be a partner. You can maybe dance as a greater number of people in a group. So this is based on the review that I was presenting previously. And what we have here is that there are some cross-cultural elements, which is why I'm putting them here. Arousal and valence mapping seem to be similar between Western and non-Westerners. I'll show you Asian populations. I'll show you in a bit this diagram. Possibly the groove score is cross-cultural because I haven't tested it, but I'm using cross-cultural neuroscience-based literature. Then, based on this study, which I'll show you in a bit as well later on, briefly, there are some musical features that are present in nearly all music across different cultures, such as binary and ternary beat-based rhythms, repetitive melodic sequences, scales up to 7 notes, and also isochronous beats. This is above 50% of cultures. All right. So what we have here is these two layers, and we'll just look at one A matrix for one of the features in the fast. Could be computed like this, where we have, take an example of arousal. We put some ranges, low, mid, and high arousal, given the signal, and we assign probabilities to each. I just took 4 columns for the example, but I assume it could be done with one column for that case. All right, so now what we have is the internal dancer models. So we'll have the fast layer output, the smaller space chunks of the grid dance floor, and some questionnaires for preferences as input for the fast layer of the internal dancer. And here we have these matrices. We have the A matrix, which is the observation model. We could have foot to beat phase perception, for instance. Then the preferences for those dancers could be having a preference for strong downbeat, for pulse clarity, maybe seeing others move to the beat has been shown to increase movement to the beat. And then there's phase accuracy and skill, which depends, let's say, a musician or so a trained musician and a trained dancer will exhibit greater accuracy because they have greater musical evidence compared to a non-musician, but still a non-musician should still be able to synchronize to the beat. And in the case of groove music, this should be enhanced even more. Then you can have some habitual preferences for the fast layer. So you could prefer to step on the first beat. And then you have the action confidence, which is alpha. And this is how confident you are with each micro move. Then the B matrix, which what are the actions you'll be taking? It could be about micro timing correction. And this would then be sent out to the group level agent. Although I think for this model, the fast layer, I don't think it should be sent out to the group level, only the slow layer. And I'll show in a bit why. But here, the slow layer of the dancers, we have slow layer output of the S group level agent, larger chunks of the dance floor, and again, questionnaires for preferences. And the A matrix observation could look at how they map emotional narratives to musical phrasing tension. This is based on some interesting work about narrative imaginings with instrumental music in different cultures. That's the inspiration for that. Then for which is Margulis et al. 2022, but I'll probably later I'll present it again in a different slide. Then the preference matrix could be what are your preferences in terms of musical climax delay, in terms of harmonic cadence complexity, in terms of musical piece structure, verse, chorus structure, lyric presence. And then you have habitual macro moves. Do you spin at a cadence? Do you tend to do clockwise spins? And then the alpha, the confidence of your actions at the higher level, or the slow layer, basically. Then B matrix, the actions could be stance chains, micro pauses, and I put improv ... because that would need some computational definition, but hey, it's there. And that would be sent out to the slow layer of the active agents. What is this group level active agent? So as a reminder, it's part of, I'll just show here, it's part of this group level agent, basically the same POMDP structure as the internal ones, but it's kind of fragmented, its processing, I guess. If it goes first sensory, then nested agents, then out. And so As a reminder, the S agent has the A matrix. And look at formation types. So, this is based on the culture. Is this genre allowing for solo, dyad, group, choreo formations? Then the group level action, U, can be increasing head count, decreasing it, or group formation moves, join split, etc. Then the slow scale transition, I was mentioning that's the most important one for the group level, because foot positioning for which is at the fast layer, probably isn't relevant for a group level, or at least a simple group level modeling of this groove and dancing. So yes, we have the slow scale transition matrix or dynamics, and for instance, it's based on the formation bin. And here, this is the most important part. So if we have a case of learned choreography, a setting where there's a learned choreography, we can add a habit prior with the E matrix, where we could have all the dancers are sharing the same routine. So the preferences for the policy selection could be similar because of the scripted choreography. And finally, this ties into Peter's publication, which is how does the action confidence aggregate or generate the group level confidence and action. This would be based on personality within the internal dancers, personality questionnaires, and maybe some different cues that you'll see in a bit what I mean, but if we want to have a dynamic alpha. Again, this is what we're looking at: environment, group level, internal, dancers, out. Now, yeah, I didn't mention here, but I'm not sure if I actually mentioned it. That's some other point, but the group level active agent may not always appear depending on the style of music. So yeah, but the sensory agent is pretty practical to have it there all the time for that sort of cultural bias. So I'm gonna reinterpret the work by Peter, giving a dancing groove interpretation. So in this paper, there was a few simulations that were done, and they measured how the action confidence of the internal agents generated the group level action confidence. And so in this first example, this first graph, A, is a simple group where everyone has the same confidence of action, and turns out that the group level agent also has the same. It could represent professional dancer confidence or having a coherent group. In this varying alphas setting, the different agents have different confidence, and this could have some sort of leader-follower setting for the dancing. Could represent that. In the C graph, we have a deterministic voting rule for generating the group level confidence. And here we can think about what it does. It takes the alpha that's the most votes. And so here we can be following a clear leader, exactly best fit for choreography or teacher-led formations. And finally, this is divergent preferences, where the E matrix of what's your policy preferences were different. And so it did not arise in a clear group level confidence action. And this could be thought of as in solo-oriented dance floors, maybe in rave music, let's say that as an example. All right, so because I'm mentioning that musical groove is a social bonding mechanism, here are a few metrics suggested for social bonding based on this model. We can look at the fast layer to look at phase locking between the beats and the agents, this behavioral entrainment. We can look at narrative alignment. This I find interesting. That's just looking at the slow layer of the phrase tension trajectory. And we can compare between the observation of the musical tension from the dancers to its own mean belief, which could be thought of as preferred archetype arc. Yes. Then with free energy drop, it's a very good indication of, well, it could be a good indication of bonding to the music, for instance, or between if several agents have the same level of free energy drop. Subjective reward could be looked at, so at the slower layer with the C matrix, where greater satisfaction is realized when the musical phrasing states match the preferences of the prior of the agent, C matrix. Now, a question came up, does it mean that also the habitual preferences start to match up if we have, phrasing greater satisfaction? Worth exploring. And then adding a initiation likelihood of participation, because not everyone likes to dance immediately. And so in the E matrix, we could have the probability of no dance policy, where higher baseline confidence would have a lower prior for no dancing. For instance, you're more confident to want to act, and we would reduce therefore the no dancing policy. Right. So what I want to do quickly is show you a few slides from the groove review that I did for the symposium talk. And just to give you a bit of context, so there's the neuroscience of musical rhythm perception from brain regions. This was the cross-cultural study that it was a statistical cross-cultural study looking at, preferences between music of different cultures. And the more white, the more present this musical feature is in these different places in the world. So you have the binary and ternary rhythms, the scales that are below 7 or equal to 7 degrees notes, motivic patterns, which are repeated melodies, isochronous beat, which isn't as common everywhere, but still quite common. So that's interesting. And this is the study about cross-cultural arousal and valence perception that was similar. This is the correlation factor. And just a little reminder again, what is groove? It's moderate rhythmic complexity. And the literature identifies between this tempo range, which is the walking tempo. But I just do want to say that doesn't mean that you cannot behaviorally train to lower tempos. This is just probably the easiest one. And yes. So this was the aspect I was mentioning about how we could develop a dynamic alpha of confidence action within the dancers based on social context. So based on the review, I came up with this hypothetical sort of hierarchy of contextual factors for engaging in dancing. And for instance, some individuals might have self-doubt. Others might require, so this is how far are you from engaging with the musical groove. And so you could have measured with the entropy equation and have self-doubt, then seeing others move, or this could be enough for you to engage with the groove. You could have some sort of familiarity with the musical aspect. These are all musical perception aspects. So you recognize the song. Do you recognize just musical elements of the music? And is there an emotional journey? Expressivity of the musicians. So this could be used as part with questionnaires to influence the action confidence, the alpha of the dancers too, and we can have a sort of dynamic alpha that changes throughout the music depending on these aspects. So showed you this little nice quote, which from that cross-cultural statistical study, dance is an energetic mode of participation for a large population, regardless of age, familiarity with music, or instrumental and singing virtuosity. I wonder who is listening here is loves to dance. I'd like to see your hands later on. That'll be, I'm not sure if we'll do it later. I like to dance. And the very last slide is future directions. So we have here some limitations. So for instance, the A matrices, the observation models, for it to be as objective as possible, or inter-objective as possible, we would require several experts on different disciplines, because to get different views on music perception and cultural, I mean, there might be some questionnaires out there that are pretty good for this, but this may be a limitation. Group level C matrix would really emphasize the cultural filter, and we could compare different cultures and model them using the C matrix. For instance, this example of the tango group must have a head count of 2 people when dancing. Is two people when dancing tango, whereas in another setting you could play some tango music and this different culture, let's call them, are okay with a greater head count. There could be other cultural filters, of course. And then it's simplified first attempt. So it's a static and fixed model for the matrices, and it might hide some interesting phenomena. And then we could add a greater granularity of the brain-body dynamics. So yeah, and we can add, for instance, more than just arousal and valence in the musical perception. Future directions would be to apply this model to data. So my data with the sleep study is a multidimensional sleep analysis of dementia caregivers. So I have polysomnography made for residential use, so it's in their home setting, and salivary epigenetics, as well as questionnaires. So maybe I could change a bit the model so that it looks at this sleep, because they won't be dancing while sleeping. And then we could use published results in the literature. So this Margulis et al. That I mentioned has this comparison, or we can input the numbers they've found into the model. Then it could be, I find it interesting to have this sort of narrative integration, which is about narrative imaginings, and it's therapeutic or individuation, for the Jungian term, purpose. So Jungian music therapy, called guided imagery with music, is a Jungian music therapy type, and we can be useful for that therapeutic setting. Then we could extend the nested dancers to have a more federated approach, which in essence leans towards a more dynamic model. And the difference between generalized, synchrony, and federated. So yeah, generalized synchrony would be happening either way with this. Well, that's the suggestion, that musical groove is a strong shared stimulus inductor, let's say, whereas the federated aspect is a extension of that. Finally, there could be a continuous representation of this model following Fristen's et al. Fristen 2013, looking at music and brain. Thank you very much. This is the way to contact me. I also have a YouTube channel that has allowed me to learn a bit more about active inference. And when I presented, I'm kind of proud of this, that I presented at the November, had 79 subscribers, and today I'm at nearly double, over double. And I want to thank the theoretical neurobiological lab for inviting me, Carl Fristing as well, and also for letting me join your lab meetings and learning. To thank my supervisors at SIMTER, so Professor Jörg Fagner, Dr. Alex Street, and Professor Annie Heiderscheit. Fraser Patterson is also at the Active Inference Institute. We had a conversation that inspired me this talk and the symposium for letting me present, and some discussions with Dr. Ian Tennant. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you so much, Leonardo, for the talk. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miguel.
So now we're going to move to the Q&A session and discussion. So if there are any questions, just feel free to raise your hand. I just have like a general one about more like the concept of groove, because
okay.
So just to and from there, like how to formally define it, because I guess might be somehow related to some measure of entropy, right? Like how much like uncertainty do you have on whether like some like musical note is gonna land on a quarter note or off that, right? That would be like kind of starting to have some kind of groove in there. But it feels like the non-complexity. So if we move into like a complexity axis and we are in the extreme where there's no complexity at all, I guess, yeah, like Western music would be just quarter notes. But what's the meaning of complexity in certain cultures where the bass line is actually groovy, you know?
Yeah.
Did that make any sense? Yeah.
No, it does. So I'm just putting back the. So your question is, how do we measure groove, and how would we look at a state where it's not only percussive examples? I guess that's where what you bring about the bass.
Yeah.
And so, good questions. The approach for that is using this spectral flux, which I present in the other presentation, which I go in more detail. Spectral flux is this is a spectral analysis that looks at changes in energy, let's say. And the approach that I'm going for at the moment is subdividing the musical audio into 16th notes. I think that's quarter notes in English. And based on based on the study, it's saying about 30% to 45% of 16th notes played offbeat allows to define this groove aspect. And this is obviously is not the perfect representation of this, because they just asked musicians to say, hey, play groovy. And they played groovy in different ways, which is a good way to get to it, I think. But yeah, it's a work in progress, I guess. So I think that answers your whether the bass is being played, because here we're just looking at just energy in general. We're not percussion, not MIDI data, basically.
Okay, so okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Ali, do you have your hand raised? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you so much for your fascinating talk. Actually, as a conductor and a music theorist and also researcher for nearly 20 years, I've long been fascinated with the intersection of temporality and affectivity as they emerge in musical experience, because my work with performers and also students alike has continually affirmed that musical time is not merely something we measure or just simply track, but something we somehow inhabit, we live through, something deeply embodied and affectively charged. So if I may, I'd like to briefly recommend three theoretical treatises, which are in my view, a bit overlooked. In fact, should I say, often overlooked in computational cognitive science. But I think they can offer rich conceptual resources for rethinking musical time and groove. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with these resources, but anyway, the first one is Christopher Hastie's Meter as Rhythm.
Okay.
which reconceives meter not as a static structure imposed from outside on music, but rather as a dynamic, emergent process, something projected and kind of reshaped in real time by the listener's temporal engagement. So let me put the link to this book here in the chat. So the other one, sorry. So the second one is David Burrows' Time and the Warm Body, which is a deeply original exploration of how time and temporality is kind of fundamental for the persistence of any biological organism. And especially in the case of music, well, the music is also co-constituted through these kinds of perception of what he calls the nowness of the time. So it also expands on similar ideas as Christopher Hastie's to develop some, in my view, original theoretical work. Drawing on many of the works done in the embodied cognition research. And so it kind of situates the temporality as something more fundamental as it often is perceived in music theoretical work or other research areas. And finally, the third and the most recent one is Mariusz Kosak's Enacting Musical Time. Sorry, let me put the link for that second book
Fantastic. Yeah,
here as
I
well.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes, and the third one here, sorry. Yeah.
Awesome.
So enacting musical time draws on both Hastie and Burrows and situates their insights within a rich enactive and phenomenological framework. So Kosak emphasizes that musical time is not passively received, but enacted through the listener's embodied involvement, and especially it connects temporality to the sense of affectivity and how they both co-emerge alongside each other while listening to any kind of music, but particularly the Western contemporary art music, which, as you know, is pretty much difficult to model in terms of steady pulses and grooves and so on. So what unites these works, I believe, is a shared commitment to understanding musical temporality as something effectively lived and corporally enacted. So from this perspective, I believe grooves are not simply patterns to be quantified or entrained to, but something rather emergent relational phenomena. They're like temporal forms that arise through the intertwining of sound, body, attention, and especially the affectivity of the listener. Yeah, I'd like to know your opinion on these matters as well, because I usually don't see these theoretical works cited in much computational cognitive science research. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Well, I wasn't aware of these specific works, but from the descriptions you've given me, which has given me some sort of understanding, has to do with the fact that rhythm is a projection, and it's a dynamic projection that changes as you listen to the music. It's also not only it's an affective projection, so your body is the one responsible for this, and how you feel. And so I heard two questions at the end, whether groove should not be a metric or should not only be a metric, and the affective aspect of temporal form. And so I'll start with the groove not being a metric only. So I've looked at the groove literature, and that's how it's based on the fact that groovy music is very pleasurable, and it's been described as pleasurable urge to move. And then it's very important therapeutically, for instance, in Parkinson's disease, where you get to play groovy music and people get to walk again to the beat, but not to simpler beats. And yes, at the moment, a simpler model is just 4x4 music. That's it, binary music. But from my listening of music since this review, I assume that there are moments that we can either, in classical music, there are moments that make you want to dance, move, let's say, and train behaviorally. And in my conceptualization, I would say that's a moment of groove, right? And this moment of groove, using that study on cross-cultural musical features across cultures, is the fact that there's binary and ternary subdivisions of rhythm. And we could base this on just that binary and ternary. And then for more complex measures, it will be a combination of those ternary and binary fundamental subdivisions. Okay, now I'm still trying to make it a measure, right? I'm still trying to extract from the audio signal what some sort of maybe physics or some sort of features. But music is perceived, and you're saying it's perceived through emotions. Now, to apply a musical model, my approach would be that we would have to have a foundational acoustic model such that we extract these binary beats, these, for instance, and then on top of that would be the sort of affective modeling, where we could look at, well, in the one of the aspects I suggested, musical tension and release, but this could be subject to the individual, right? I mean, that could be one way to approach this individual affectiveness of the projections, let's say, of the rhythms or the phrasing. So there could be a sort of a model that extracts tension and resolution. And then there's some preferences for certain, I don't know, distances of, not distance, timing of tension. And Wagner, you might like it because it's super tense. It's like, whereas someone who doesn't like, prefers short, tense resolution music would not want to interact with that. And this could reflect their own affective projections. But I suppose we can't, I don't know if we can measure everything, but I guess it's about finding maybe some tricks to do it. And so to help out, I guess, therapeutic context, for instance. What do you think of that, Ali?
Thank you so much. So just one quick question. Does your model also include the groove that some listeners get from listening to a repetition of patterns of long and short beats? Because there is some debate among scholars. Some people believe that groove only can happen for equally divided beats. So we cannot actually groove for I don't know unequal beats. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But well, I suppose as a composer yourself, I think you would agree that this kind of groove for unequal beats can easily happen, especially when repeated enough times. So, does your model also account for that kind of groove as well?
That's a good question. The approach for the groove score was attempting to just focus on isochronous, so just equal beats. But then again, in, let's say, more complex ones where you could repeat, it comes down to the modeler saying, look, there is a repetition of this time point, so let's use that as I don't know, I haven't tried that, so I don't know if it will work at a longer time scale or whatever, because it could be a longer time scale, this sort of division, I guess. I don't know, maybe not, I'll say.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Andres, do you have your hand raised as well?
Yes, thank you, Ali, for the book recommendations, and thank you, Leonardo, for your talk. Uh, it gave me a lot to think about. I like music and the dancing, and you talked about, I think, the group dynamics for dancing. So I thought it was interesting how you could have competence as a factor, and so someone of competence, someone who picks up on the groove or is, a skilled dancer, is able to raise the level of other people too, or kind of get them going, right? And then
Yeah,
that made me
yes.
think, and I like the funnel that you had, like the filter, how people filter towards their, getting into the groove. But that made me think that there's another factor perpendicular to this, maybe in terms of social function, social intention, which could be
Mm.
more cognizant. So, like when I think of all the arguments for the embodied mind are also arguments for the disembodying mind. Like if you look at the history of evolution, it's all about the mind becoming more abstract and divorced from reality. I think that's why we have active inference, right? Like it's the same argument, but just how are you going to look at it? And so the groove in terms of competence is all about inactiveness. I mean, I think, like you said, your body is urging you to do this, right? But imagine if you have other people, maybe their body's not urging that much, but they have social interests, they have social functions. So, for example, they want to include people, or they want to show attention, or they want to get attention, or they want to be with somebody, or they want other people to be together. You see, so I think it becomes interesting. Like if you have those two different angles, one which is very inactive, and the other which is kind of more predictive, right? Like people trying to achieve something, they've got these goals, right? Like how would how would this swirl about? And I think practically, I think what it becomes interesting is like if you're a person, it kind of if you could model that well, and it might be difficult to have data, but you could have agents who practice, like in a scene like this. What's the impact of this agent? What's the impact of that agent? Maybe there's ways to scientifically model that. But the idea being that it could be practically very helpful to know, especially for organizers or for cognizant people, like even if you don't have a lot of skill, how do you leverage people who do? How do you, what are the niche roles that you can play to make a party have, successful? I'm wondering if that makes sense.
Great. Yeah. It's the how to make a successful party model.
Yes.
That's good. Yeah. No, that's a very interesting point. I, I assume I would have to think about it a bit more, but that it could be added to either. Oh, let me share my screen. So we could have. Sorry. Okay. So we have these B matrices that encode actions, and we have the dancers, the internal dancers, and some of them won't be internal dancers, but still could be in the dance floor. So they could have just a different way of acting, the different preferences of acting as well. They could this would be encoding, let's say, the organizer of the party or the DJ would be not dancing necessarily. He could be just gathering people as a
Yeah, for DJs, for AI to support DJs, I don't know, or give recommendations, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Look at mapping the dance floor for the DJs. Yeah, that could be
coaching, DJ coach.
DJ coach. That could be one approach to do that. And the other mention is your question was, oh yeah, I guess, and then we have to look at some metrics at what would make a successful party, I guess. So
I guess in the filter diagram that you had, which I thought was very nice, that funnel, I think the point being that like social inclusion, like the desire to, the desire to social function, the social intent changes that dynamic very, it transgun like the more socially purposeful you are, the more you're going to get into the groove, right? You're
Fair enough.
going to
Yeah.
overcome your, fears. You're going to overcome. So
Yeah.
it doesn't change that filter, but it changes where it kind of pushes you along that. And see, it also works the other way. Like, I think the social framing, you kind of mentioned this, keeps people from doing things, right? Like, you really need to have a well-framed social situation for people to think about, oh, will I do this? Would I do this?
Mhm.
Unless you're a very
Right.
groovy person, but mostly.
Yeah. There's mostly going to be some sort of cultural rules that, you're not
Yeah.
you'll dance at a specific moment during a marriage, not at any moment, for instance.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, go for it, Andres. Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I guess if there are no more questions, we can move to you,
May I ask
Kyle.
one, may I ask one more?
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
wanted, because I just know a little bit about music. I like it. I tried to have a theory of music, but the best that I could get basically, and I liked, I was at Leonard Bernstein's The Unanswered Question, beautiful series of, but I thought about like call and response. So what's the difference between music and sound, like animal sounds or whatever? And I think for me, the difference is like if I have a Lithuanian children's song, like it goes, garnys, garnys, turilgas kojas. If I repeat it, which they do, garnys, garnys, turilgas kojas, that's just sound. That's not music. But then you have the other part. It goes, bikčio, bikčio, kad galėčiau ilgas kojas, kad turėčiau kaip garnys. You see, bikčio, bikčio, kad galėčiau. You see, so the idea is that you really have to shift modes. It has to be a dialogue in order for it to count as music. You have to have more than one, like, whether it's call and response. If it's just, but now with dance music or something, I don't know if there ever is. Maybe that doesn't qualify as music. Sometimes it's just like droning on and on. I don't know if that's, but in general, well, maybe that defeats my theory, but.
No, I mean, in dance music, let's take house music. If it's the most simplest type of dance music, there's some sort of repetition still, which I assume call and response is this type of repetition. But I'd like to hear Ali respond this as well. But yeah, that's anyone else who's willing. But yeah, sound and I don't remember how to distinguish sound and music. Repetitive aspects or call and response is a nice feature. There must be some other ones as well.
But the point being that it's not the point being that you have to set up two different frames, like two different mindsets, and then switch between them. If you just have one mindset, it's just sound. You need to be able to, and it's not easy to set up. And you have these layers. You have like singing in unison. So I think like Michael Tomasello's work on joint intentionality makes us human. It really suggests like that music was the origin of language, that singing, like, because the apes don't do that, they don't sing in unison, but we autistic people, I think they would have like the thing that makes us not autistic, let's say, right, is that we're able to tune into each other, the synchronicity of bodies, which people don't talk about, that sixth sense that autistic people, I think that's why they're autistic. They don't have it. That's my feeling. That's my thought. I guess I should be careful, but you have the unison, then you have the rhythm, then you have the melody, then you have the harmony. You have different parsers. And so the ability to have different parsers is what allows us to appreciate that there's something more sophisticated going on, that it's not all one thing. And so to set that up to where you have two different somehow modes, then that proves that there's something here going on that we're syncing ourselves to. It's maybe a shared intentionality, something like that.
But if I may interject briefly, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work done by scholars like Elizabeth Margolis or not, but one of the, I believe, insightful aspects of their work is to reveal how just one aspect of musicality, so for instance, repetition, can enhance the sense of musicality and the sense of perception of some trivial sounds as music. So there's some research done which indicates toward this kind of subjective perception of music. So they've just played very trivial, let me just say, noise, a sound clip, but they played that repetitively. And after a few repetition, listeners would conceive that repetitive noise as a kind of music. So this aspect of repetition is pretty fundamental for any perception of sound as music. Or there's another very famous study done by Diana Deutsch, speech to music, if I may recall, if I recall correctly, which again indicates the significance of repetition in perception of sound, speech as a kind of melody. So if we take a very ordinary, trivial part of speech and then repeat that, I don't know, several times, maybe just 3 or 4 times, most listeners would listen to that afterwards, that trivial speech as a kind of melody with its own pitch pattern, own rhythm, and so on. So I believe it's impossible to draw a boundary between sound and music, given the subjectivity of this perception of music. So, but that's just my thought.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. And Andreas.
Yeah. Can I say something? Can you
Yeah,
hear
sure.
me? Well,
Yeah.
it's very fascinating. There's 2 things that slightly puzzle me. What's the relationship between what you're looking at and the rhythmistic changes of band definitions when you have peaks and non-peaks in the rhythmicity of EEG activity? And so I'm unclear as to how you link the EEG, the different rhythms. We know that theta rhythm is extremely important, linked very closely to motor activities, to the amygdala, and also to movement. So I'm interested to know the relationship of what you're looking at, and you know exactly what Nigel and I and others are doing, because we've discussed it. I'm interested in that as an issue to the actual EEGs. But also, you brought up lyrics, and it seems to me, we've just had a hint of this, but it seems to me that once you bring singing words into a piece of music, you change the whole atmosphere of it. That's what opera is about, perfectly, and of course others as well. But opera, it is about the music, which brings an extra dimension to pieces of music. And I'm just wondering, you've got to bring this into your problems.
Fair enough. Yeah, for the last, just on the lyrics aspects, I agree with you that it brings a semantic aspect. Or, I mean, in opera, sometimes it's difficult to follow the semantic if you're not reading all the time, but still brings the human voice, I guess. And yeah, I haven't thought about how that could be incorporated. It would be, I would assume it's just I would assume it's another feature in the A matrix, the observation model, which would require its own computation. So the good thing about this POM-DP active inference model developed by the active inference theoreticians is that you can incorporate all the features where you need them to be, and then it's up to us to kind of know what computation to do, the correct one. So for the lyrics and the words, that's, I have to find what's out there already. And then, thank you, Michael, for those questions. The other one is in terms of how to relate it to peaks in EEG. So in the review that I had looked at for the symposium presentation in November, I looked at beat entrainment, and beat entrainment, it tends to increase beta waves at the beat. So it synchronizes with that, with the beat, the beta wave. Now, then, I have some other, let's see, there was this thing, let's see. So I want to show you another slide from that previous presentation, but I haven't. Let me see. This is what we have. Nope. Ah, sorry. It's a hidden slide. This one. So here, what do we have? We have also gamma as a. So there's different EEG patterns that we can observe depending on so harmonic violation, for instance. That is the it's like the Aran, so it's this one, this sort of peak you get to see, yeah. And then the MNM, not MNM, MMN, which is this one, results in a violation from habitual exposure. So these are some sort of peaks, I guess. And then there's apparently theoretically you get top-down beta activity in this study, which could represent the fact that you're predicting the beat. Okay, there's beta increasing at that moment. It's very clear, and you see. I'll show you if you want a graph. The beta increases just at the beat, and then gamma would represent prediction errors, I guess.
Yeah, the rhythms are sustained, but the bursts that you get are unperiodic and short-lived. Mm-hmm. And presumably this comes, I think I know about Kolsch's work, and I think it seems to me that has to come in to the overall equation.
Fair enough.
I'm sort of interested in what sleep spindles are doing. How is it that sleep spindles take people into sleep? But they're bursting, they're short, and out of rhythm with, for example, REM sleep. And so I'm just wondering how you take these complexities. Well, I said you told me it's to do with complexity, isn't it? So it's these complexities that add to the problem.
Yes, I haven't thought about how to add these peaks of EEG, which is worth thinking about. I guess in the next steps, this is a simpler active inference representation of the setting of music listening. Now we have to add these brain aspects into it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Patrice, I saw you had your hand raised as well.
Hi, Patrice.
Go ahead.
Hi, Leonardo. Good to see you again.
See you.
So I'm always here to bring in the one person or the personal or the clinical, if I can.
Of course, yes.
Two things. I presented in, I don't remember, 2017, I think, about a patient who, during a group psychotherapy session, so this patient is highly regimented, always has a sense that her mother's hanging over saying, who do you think you are? You know, be still, not be an agent. So I invited 4 members of the group to stand up and her to stand up. And the other members are highly musical, readily movable. So they start moving and she can't. No matter what, she can't. And ultimately, she's able to say, I could feel I wanted my feet to move, and they wouldn't move. So I don't know when you do this experiment or what the experiment will be, but you have to have a psychological question that elicits something about your self-doubt part. And I don't know what the question would be that will catch all the different layers that it comes out in. I had another patient who her favorite sentence was, you know, I want to dance like no one's watching, you know, those kind of things. And finally, the autistic question that comes up, if you see the movie The Accountant with The Accountant, number 2. I can't remember who the lead actor is. He's autistic.
Okay.
I won't describe the whole plot, but he's autistic, and he's at like they're doing country music, and he wants to dance, but he's sitting there not dancing. And then he recognizes the beat matches a beat of a song that he always sings to himself when he gets upset. And so he starts tapping out the beat, and all of a sudden he gets up and he kind of gets into the group and he looks around, and then he starts to dance. It turns into, I mean, it's a, what do you call, like a thriller. So it turns into more, but it's a very good example of where the personal does meet the point where a person can move. So you might consider it.
Those are great examples. I really appreciate sharing about those therapeutic settings. It makes me think of the accountant of the familiarity aspect of music, which is just super important. Even for sleep music, you need to have preferences for it to be effective. Let me just bring up. So I'll just do it like this. So what you here was one of the aspects, familiarity, which is it could be thought of as the familiarity of the whole song. But yeah, you are some sort of associative familiarity, which I thought is important. And even as I mentioned in sleep music, you have to prefer the music so that it is effective. And the self-doubt aspect that you've just opened the Pandora box for needs to be well studied, I guess, to be able to adjust the preference matrices of the dancers such that, or so the policy aspect or the policy selection preferences or the
Right, the habitual
preferences.
part you mentioned,
the individual parts.
I would bet there are some questions regarding group activity that would out there, like you can find somebody who's asked questions about group activities, and it could come close to this being a group activity. But and I've actually, I think 5 years later, this happened again with the patients in group. It was a different group. That patient wasn't in the group, but she had, quote unquote, changed enough where the conversation later, like in the group, was how she actually could consider getting up and joining the group. She didn't, and she didn't press into it, but she could consider it. She could feel more of a sense that this activity would be okay. So it was
interesting.
Also, I mean, it's clear about, and when I presented to Carl, it's about precision. I'm like, okay, fine. It is now. I was back then learning what is precision, but you know much better. So
I mean, it's good that you mentioned, the precision being influenced by, there's this one row, just quickly looking at, this is where I guess the self-doubt could be. There's a sort of a probability of no dance policy where you would prefer not to dance, and we could have, for instance, the different aspects that contribute to it, but could be the precision of the actions would be low, and could be influenced depending of the person, of the questions we ask to figure out what contributes to their no dance policy.
Right.
They might have a very large probability of no dance policy. Because many things contribute to it.
Right.
Something worth exploring. Thank you very much, Patrice.
Okay, nice Q&A session. Lots of questions, very interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we can move to you, Carl, now.
Is it my turn now?
It is, yeah.
Very good.
Carl.
As noted, a great question and answer session, which makes me somewhat redundant, which is quite useful because I've just been called to another meeting. But I'm going to stay on as long as I can, just to sort of feedback and celebrate what was discussed. I do actually feel a little bit redundant here. You and the audience have expertise here, which far outstrips my own in this sphere. And it is interesting to note that you've already spoken to a lot of people, sort of Michael and Patrice, and are you also in communication with Peter Thestrup Wade, or Varde, as you pronounced it?
No, well, no. I met him in person at the Oxford conference.
Okay, yeah, excellent. Okay, well, that would be certainly one angle to pursue. And connections with Ali. Ali, where are you? You're in Canada, aren't you?
No, I'm in Iran.
In Iran. Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So the reason I thought about Montreal was there is a group of people there looking at sort of ritual and through the lens of active inference and the importance of sort of co-constructing and scaffolding one's sort of federated priors through ritual and dance. So are you in contact with those people? I'm thinking specifically of Jonas Mago, who's doing a PhD in this space.
Mago.
Yeah, Mago, Jonas, Jonas. I'm just thinking of other experts that you're in this field, that it might be useful just to join the dots. But anyway, I'm going to speak quickly because I'm aware this is being recorded, and I want to be able to feed back before disappearing off to a more technical meeting.
Okay.
It does strike me, I will limit my focus to what has Active Inference got to offer your program. And it strikes me that it may be useful to be slightly more focused in your appeal to Active Inference. A lot of the more interesting things you said were not really about picking out the ways that you would formulate all your expertise in terms of likelihood mappings. And I'm not sure anybody would really understand that, to be quite honest. You may understand it, but it would take a lot of communication and a lot of hard work to actually implement your ideas in a working model. So what I'm trying to say is you can use active inference in one of two ways. You can either use it as a methodology, a method, as a simulation tool to demonstrate that something is an emergent property of the way things are.
Okay.
And that would require numerical simulations where you actually show a group of active inference agents synchronizing in some way that looks like dance and the emergent federated aspect of that. And furthermore, make the points or show that there is an emergent synchronization with their embodiment, should you want to, or with their affect as simply scored, for example, by that gamma parameter and the correlative dopamine. Okay. So that would be basically one application of active inference, which you would have to be, a theoretician of computational neuroscience or collaborate with one to use it. The other application is to go to the literature and see what are the emergent properties that would be appropriate to pursue in the particular application of active inference to the field of music and being in the groove, and and find those already stated in the literature, much as you did with Peter's work on blankets of blankets, for example, and then say, okay, this is a first principle account and thereby prediction of some emergent phenomena that I can now use to develop empirical measures of useful or attributes of music, for example, that would induce being in the groove. And given your eclectic interests and your focus, I think that you should do the latter. You shouldn't worry about trying to write down a script or a prescription for how somebody might actually implement this in a partially observed Markov decision process with deep structure and separation of temporal scales. That's probably a life's work. And you don't need to do that, I don't think. What you do need to do is to pick out those bits you found in the literature which speak directly to your hypotheses about the nature of the music and how it plays an integral role in co-constructive active exchange with some niche, whether it's a dance niche or a cultural niche or a musical niche or a physical, an embodied niche. That's where your expertise comes in. And it seems to me that the cross-cutting theme that you've identified is this nature of generalized synchronization of chaos as a solution to a joint free energy minimizing solution. And the other aspect of this is the separation of temporal scales that you brought to the game. And I would focus on that. So instead of trying to write down model active and partially observed Markov discipline processes of embodied music, en masse, I would not do that. You go to the literature and find the active inference where one of the or other of these aspects have already been demonstrated, and pick up what was the quintessential prediction of this formulation, and then use that to test it. And I think if you do that, then you can now write prescriptions of things that are much more doable by any scientist or indeed musician in the field. So with that in mind, what I want to go through very briefly is all the stuff that points to measures of generalized synchrony that might be usefully explored, and possibly you've already explored them and potentially deployed, and possibly you've already deployed a number of these things. And also for the people watching the recording, I've got the papers that were mentioned as well. So I'm going to grab the screen now and share the screen if I can, as I can. So just to start with, oh no, where was where are we? Here we are. The work that Ali was referring to. I think this is what he was talking about. This is one of the links that he sent for those people who don't have access to the links. And this was, I think, the second piece of literature that he was suggesting. In your brief discussion with Michael, you were also, Professor Trimble, you also touched on some quite deep issues. And for those people who are not familiar with what you were talking about, I've just got brought up this paper as a summary of the kind of work that I presume that you were referring to, which certainly does focus or emphasize pragmatic measures of generalized synchrony expressed in a variety of different ways, but also synchrony amongst the kinds of systems that would embrace the embodied aspects of being in the group, but also the affective aspects or the valenced aspects in relation to known functional anatomy in the brain. So I just put that up there as a nice example of, again, this cross-cutting theme of synchronization between various ways of measuring, for example, kinematics or people dancing, or EMG or ECG, or electroencephalography. All of these tapping into a system, and what you're looking for is evidence of generalized synchrony that is admitted by certain kinds of music with certain groups in a certain context, compared to other kinds of music that might not do this. So that may or may not be useful. There are lots of ways of measuring synchrony, and I've just listed some of the ones in this Scholarpedia article. It's a fascinating area, and I know it's something that Peter is also, Peter Thestrup-Wade is also very interested in, because he's very interested in dance and developing formal measures of the emergence of synchrony that indicates a synchronization manifold. And just to put this in a sort of active inference context, that synchronization manifold, usually between the inside of an agent and the outside of an agent, but in your instance now between one or more agents, is where the free energy minimizing solution plays out. So from the point of view of the Markov blanket, all the sensory active states play out on a synchronization manifold. So you get a mutual predictability that is summarized by being on that synchronization manifold, and you would infer that it is present in this context more than, say, in another context by using these measures of generalized synchrony, of which there are a number, and you might want to pick your favorite. I certainly have my favorite, but I'm not going to tell you which one it is. One practical way in which you can get at the kind of coupling and generalized synchrony that I'm talking about is to actually deploy dynamic causal modeling. And there's quite a large literature, not a large, there's a small literature on the application of dynamic causal modeling to interacting participants. So this might not be actual dancing people, because it might be difficult to get sort of EEG measures from dancing people, but one can imagine applying this to, say, kinematic measurements of dance, and basically trying to model the emergence of synchronization by effectively parameterizing or building a generative model where two people are coupled with sort of virtual connections, and they influence each other in a bidirectional way, and then trying to estimate the strength of that connectivity. In my world of brain scanning, this is known as hyperscanning. It's basically thinking about a hive of brains as one big brain, and then trying to work out both the within coupling, within brain coupling, and the between brain coupling. So this is a literature or a paper that you might want to. Edda has subsequently left neuroscience, but still, I think, did a remarkable summary of state of the art in this hyperscanning approach to measuring generalized synchrony. We've done that one. Yes, we have. Yeah. Have you spoken to Wolfgang Schacke?
I haven't, no.
Okay, I got a deja vu, but it may be because I've said this to so many people. You really want to look at him, and for two reasons. One, he is Mr. Synchronization in a psychotherapeutic, or more generally, dance therapy. Well, he's not himself an expert in dance therapy, but certainly when it comes to the fundamentals of synchronization in a therapeutic context, he would be probably one of the world's experts. Furthermore, he used to, with Herman Haken, who was the father of synergetics, host a biannual workshop that was explicitly for everybody who had different perspectives on generalized synchrony, both in terms of trying to characterize dyadic coupling in client therapy context using the maths of dynamical systems theory that underwrites the measures of generalized synchrony. But more interesting from your point of view, he also had a community of dance therapists coming and presenting their work and trying to communicate. Now, I'm not sure, and they used to be called Herb Academies. Herb Academies.
H-E-R-B.
Yeah, Herb-Akaad. 1 year they're in German and 1 year they're in English, and they alternate. I'm not sure they're still going on, but there'd be a perfect opportunity for you to meet that community that is both mathematical but also very therapeutically aligned, with an explicit commitment to realizing this in an embodied context in things like dance therapy. So I put this up, and this is the one paper that I wrote with Wolfgang, just to advertise him, and just so you can do a bit of background work and try and connect with that community, which I think will be very useful. There's also a lot of philosophers, and I just put this up to remind myself to mention that there's a lot of work on a much more theoretical or abstract level in terms of rituals and sort of cultural niche construction of the kind you might imagine leveraging ritualistic dance as an embodied way of co-constructing one's cultural niche, and how that relates to social norms and and related concepts. So this particular paper by Ippolito, who's currently in Australia, was focusing on the social niche construction in this instance, but just to advise you that that literature exists. You chose to look at the Peter's recent work on blankets of blankets. I think that was interesting, but it does raise some awkward questions about the purely federated and distributed nature of the kind of being in the groove that you would see on the dance floor, because you've got these two super agents like the DJ or the conductor, which I think speaks to a slightly different kind of hierarchical organization. I think your focus should really just be on the emergent synchronization amongst a number of similar kinds of things, all doing stuff together, and what makes it easy for a group of similar kind of creatures to do stuff together. And that's clearly going to be constrained by the embodiment of these things and the relational aspects, how similar they are. Can they move in the same kind of way? I can't dance with a dolphin. I couldn't dance with somebody with Parkinson's disease, but lots of Parkinson's disease patients could probably dance together with the right kind of movement. So, that relational aspect is actually horizontal. It's not hierarchical. You don't need to appeal to a higher group, but you can certainly, I think about the emergence of synchrony amongst a number of different Markov blankets, and that's been done not extensively, to a certain extent in the theoretical literature, with an explicit appeal to active inference and the free energy principle. This is one early example that, if you haven't seen, you might enjoy looking at. And the same first author, who is currently working on the cerebellum, I think somewhere in Exeter or in the West Country, also focused on the emergence of synchrony in networks of mutually inferring neurons. So if you replace neuron with somebody who can hear music, you've got exactly the same maths here that you can appeal to. As I repeat, an example of something that has emerged in the technical or theoretical literature that speaks to your story of a more narrative form, given your expertise in music. This gentleman, Takua, who currently works in Japan, took these kinds of ideas, and again, I'm assuming you know of this work, but he, again, there may be something in this kind of modeling, numerical analysis, numerical studies of social, federated, socialized mutual inference, in this instance, not of dance, but in terms of birdsong, that will make a prediction or reveal a phenomena. You say, oh yes, that's exactly what I was proposing for the role of one of the many factors and the many the measurements that you highlighted. Even more technically, I notice you using the word federated inference, and I presume it came from federated learning and more specifically federated inference belief sharing. So again, this is an example of a paper you can say it is an emergent property that lots of things with a shared sensorium, looking at the same dance floor and each other, or indeed the DJ, should necessarily, after a sufficient period of time, evince an emergence of aligned likelihood models, so that there can be communication through whatever kind of medium you want, whether it's moving your body or through language. I don't think it really matters. The point being made here that this is just another aspect, this co-construction and alignment of implicit generative models, or as somebody mentioned, the common ground that Tomasello might talk about. These things are emergent properties, and they are manifest as a kind of generalized synchrony that can be measured in terms of both the alignment of the likelihood mappings, but also in terms of the synchrony that emerges once the once the ensemble has converged on its synchronization manifold. So this would be an example of a technical reference you could use to say, this is what I anticipate will happen if these group of people can jointly get into the groove, or this person can now synchronize with their body, their biorhythms and the music and their EEG all show some three-way generalized synchronization of chaos. And that will be a measure of being in the groove, as opposed to other kinds of music that didn't induce that. Finally, there is again a technical, if you like, backdrop that would license you to foreground the imperative of working towards a shared generative model in this context, this common ground, that also requires a common sensorium and a common structural phenotype, that can be found in the active inference literature on pattern formation. You talked about dance formations. This paper wasn't focused so much on dance formations, but it was focused on joint formations, knowing your place in a particular formation. Unfortunately, this paper just addressed a static pattern, but there is current work to do, to generalize this to dynamic patterns. But the core idea here was that if we all start off either as naive dancers or skilled dancers, and we again all share the same sensorium, then it will, and we all have the capacity to understand our place in this formation, even if we don't know what that place is at the outset, then all I have to do is to infer what is my particular role in this common ground, this shared generative model. And once I've done that, I know how to talk to, broadcast, communicate with, and also understand all the cues or the signals that my co-dancers are creating. So the joint free energy minimizing solution is when everybody's in the right place, in line dancing. It doesn't matter, you don't know where you're going to be in the line dance when you start, but once you've inferred where you are, both in place and space and time, you may be at the front, you may be in the edges, whatever, then you know exactly how to behave, simply because we all share the same generative model. In this instance, it was all about cells moving to the right place in terms of forming a body. So again, this doesn't require a second order, a higher level, although it does require separation of temporal scales, but sort of refocuses the argument on communication and co-construction, generalized synchrony within a group of people who share a common ground in this instance in terms of their DNA, but for you in terms of their cultural stances and their the degree of competence and literally whether how well they can sing along or indeed in dance move along. And that's it. Good. And there's knowledge there. Yes, and that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carl. Appreciate that. Just a quick summary. I suppose that what you're telling me is forget about the PUMDP for the moment, go through these recommendations and find the maths that I'm best suited or I find best resonance with to explore this narrative.
Yes, yeah, and in a way which spoke to your future directions and not limitations, but future directions. It looks as if you are looking for ways to practically quantify what you theoretically believe should be there, and you believe it should be there because when you apply all these first principles in the literature to your particular problem, then there are a number of things that stand out, and that gives you a technical, if you like, focus in order to now develop why you're using this, why are you using that kind of data feature to actually quantify this, and then you can test your hypotheses, of which there were many, So all those contributors to the second level A matrix, they're all hypotheses. You now need to know what kind of data will enable you to test that hypothesis. And, you know, I repeat, I think it's going to be a kind of generalized synchrony or complexity or predictability measure, possibly Granger causality, possibly dynamic causal modeling, or this kind of analyses that Professor Trimble were talking about. Absolutely. Good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carl.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much, Carl, for your feedback. As always, thank you, Leonardo, for your presentation. Super interesting. And thank you, everyone, for your questions and comments. So I guess see you, everyone, next time then. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.